So I'm going to respond here to Veritas48 in his recent video on 5 questions for atheists. I think part of the thing I want to say before getting any further is I think there's too much slipperiness in between a kind of use of God in the Christian sense and then a theism in any general sense. And it's almost like there's a kind of buffet style convenience that allows one to slide in between a quick dogmatism that gives authority about actual facts as implied by the Christian Bible, and then loose senses of what I think we all vaguely feel with regard to the ultimate mystery regarding why was there something rather than nothing, why did part of the something have to be self-conscious. I think there are other questions that are appropriate to theists, but the questions that get involved in Christianity are perhaps way too dogmatic, at least as far as resurrections and things like this go. Okay, with that said, I did really find Veritas's questions to be interesting. I did find those to be very useful. And so one of the first question here would be, what question, if the Christian God were the real God and it were Judgment Day, and now there I was, there I would be facing God, and what question would I have, or what would I say first to God? I think I would say, from whom do you seek forgiveness? How do you expiate the guilt you must feel for having released organisms into self-awareness and yet to die anyway? The question of how could one allow the horror to go on, and from whom do you seek forgiveness? How do you live with yourself, and how do you expiate the guilt you must have for having brought about such unmitigated suffering? I think the second question Veritas asks is, what evidence would you need? And he brings up like a burning bush or something like this. For me, I would just say that, especially as we don't mean the Christian God, if all we're trying to get at is towards something like theism, all the evidence is in. What more do you need? There's no evidence needed beyond what we do have experiences of, and by that I mean tastes of transcendence through mathematical regularities. There are principles of unification that we can be everything from things like pi, and it's sort of like the question of all everything that is, the sheer fact that this is the great mystery that this is, including the very nothingness by which all that is can make room for itself. I think this also is very related to the question of what do we mean by God. I always liked it that in Plato and in the ancients, they had notions like the giants and the gods and the mortals. They had a wider range of experience, especially, if you watch modern shows like Star Trek or Doctor Who. It's funny, does Star Trek have a god? Well, I don't know. They have the Q continuum. They have various assortiums of kinds of powers and ranges of diversity that I think we would call something like a divinity, but I don't think they ever have something like the Judeo-Christian God who's making rules and has a personal relation and intervenes and all this kind of stuff. I think the same with Doctor Who. Doctor Who is a little bit more, the Doctor intervenes, but I don't think we ever think of the Doctor as the creator or as the one behind it all or something like this. But I think there's much more in imagination of the range of kinds of divinity, and I guess the range of what the world is and our place in it. Now, this is really related, I guess, to the third question about to what extent is the atheism position, modern atheism, enabling a free thinking, or does it orient toward sort of skepticism? Does it help skepticism? Does it lead toward dogma? I think that this is something that I, from my perspective, would camp both theists and atheists in. The rise of a kind of what I would call a mean-spirited, low-visioned literalism. It's a very tragic. It's a posture of a debunking that once it's assumed a wholly scientific worldview, it misses the fact that we are storytelling operatic apes. We're animals who've dramatically pantomimed some of the most amazing, meaningful stories, but slowly those have been debunked and eroded. I mean, it's hard for us to really think of what life must have been like in the pre-Copernican world. I think it's very difficult. Um, and I think it's partly related to the way some Christians, for example, like to proclaim an adherence to their Christian dogma, but the second that they get questioned in a way that they feel goofy, they immediately slide into some sort of buffet style theism. They're hard to pin down, but they do have this sort of, uh, I think, a slipperiness, which is unfortunate, which makes its own kind of dogma, in the same way that I think there are some, certainly not all, but some atheists who have become very dogmatic in what they think the adequate life script is for the human organism. I think even to talk in terms of biology and organism and relations between the environment, those are useful. I'm not trying to deny it as a truth, but it's one way of talking. It's one way of being in the world. To imagine that one is able to relate to the stars and to, I guess, in some way really feel identified with the larger cosmos, that seems very different. I mean, the task is to reinvigorate the depth of mystery through science, to take science and let it open the human imagination to human possibilities. But for me, so much of this has to begin with death itself as a gift, hardship as a gift, struggle as a gift. The more that we don't see the fact that our own mortality is part of how meaning becomes possible, I think we miss it. It's unfortunate that for Veritas, it seems like all of the meaning is going to come at the end, and that's what will validate what we're going to do. I'm not saying he suggested that, but the fact that that was the first question, I think, was sort of telling. The question of how does one's atheism benefit oneself in the world. Again, I don't consider myself to be an atheist, but I do consider myself to be not a Christian, and so to that extent, I'm not sure if others would call me an atheist. So I guess if I have to deal with other people calling me an atheist, I would say that my atheism, which I would call somewhere between, I guess, a deist, a sort of neo-Stoic theism, is that it's about self-relation and the depth of self-relation in terms of what could be called prayers for courage or strength or forgiveness. It's about learning to become more open to the world's diversity and to see nature as change, diversity, and death, and to see how much death is part of nature and is part of what we take to be life. Too unfortunately, life and death have been separated in Christian orientations. I think if there is a real benefit for those people who are atheists out there, one of the main benefit is for them to posse up resources to be very critical of those ridiculously self-righteous Christians who do, or Muslims or other people who do horrors in the name of God. I think we can start to see that claiming God as an ultimate imperative or more sort of motive for action. Hopefully, atheism is helping to give people resources to be critical of that. I think this last question of do you want, true belief or get rid of false belief, or what are you sort of doing? I wasn't really sure. That last question that he had, I think, was the most mysterious of them all. I guess from my perspective, I would say it as the task is to not have overdrawn expectations. I see so many people who are atheists who, it's, you can see the ex-Christianity, the ex-Catholicism as a monkey on their back. They're sort of dealing with the disappointment of having been debunked. It's like their childhood was pre-Copernican and their adulthood became Copernicus. and living in the wake of that, now they run around and go, well, geez, because I had overdrawn expectations, life just stinks and it sucks. Truth is, it's a huge, amazing, beautiful gift. If you imagine and fully realize that you've gotten something for nothing, and that death is the gift that makes all the something meaningful, that's a wonderful thing. People need richer conceptions of what God could or might be, and just look all around them. Thanks.